In this video, we are going to be looking at VoiceWare's cloud construction, how VoiceWare does cloud, and what that means to our resellers. To begin with, the first question is, why should you go cloud anyways? And the simple answer to that question is sometimes it's required by some brands. For example, all True by Hiltons are being told by Hilton that they must go cloud. Now, whether or not the GM or the ownership decides to do that is another question, but there's been a big shift and push by the big brands to make sure that their hotels are going cloud. Other answers, customers are asking for it. It will survive local network and power failures because if you host your phone system in an offsite data center, as long as that data center remains functional, calls into the property will still be answered by the IVR and have the option to go to voicemail or be rerouted to someone's cell phone, which is a real advantage if the power or network at your hotel goes offline. It is more reliable. The servers that are running the cloud up in the data centers are much beefier and have much more oomph and power and reliability to them than anything that we can put on site. It's also more secure. Again, it's locked away in the data center, and the people that we use, which we'll talk about here in just a moment, take security and reliability very seriously. So previously, as you might recall, VoiceWare and Phonesuite, we began doing cloud on our own. And we started out with data centers, our own data centers, and our own servers in them in Denver and Dallas. And while these were official data centers, we rented space in a rack. It was very expensive to do. And it became clear pretty quickly that the resources required to maintain the security and the reliability were just something more than Phonesuite really had to offer at that point. So we started looking for an alternative, and what we found was Amazon Web Services, or AWS for short. If you've ever done any research on Amazon Web Services, you'll know it is a huge amount of services that Amazon offers. They offer everything from computing, which we use, to storage, to artificial intelligence, to giant databases and data mining, things of that nature. We only use a very small subset of the total services that Amazon provides. Namely, we use EC2, or Elastic Cloud Computing, for our servers, which is basically just a VoiceWare-like server up in the cloud that we can license and provision for each individual hotel. And we can turn these on or off as we see fit. They come with their own networking and firewall and everything else that we're going to need. Amazon has data centers in many different regions. The only one we can't use on this map is the AWS Gov Cloud, but we do have the availability to launch instances in Virginia, Oregon, and Northern California, so we can get things geographically close to where the hotel actually is. In addition to just telling you how Phonesuite does hosted, we wanted to also extend this opportunity to our resellers. So resellers now have access to the same hosted solution that we use for Phonesuite Direct. If a reseller chooses, they can have Phonesuite spin up a server and hand all of the maintenance and billing. So what that means is if a reseller wants to do hosted, they will let us know, and we will spin up a server and then just bill you for that spin up fee and for the monthly charge of that server, as well as the licensing. These servers will be isolated, and the reseller can take over the AWS account if needed and capable. So at some point in the future, if you want to go it alone, we can break these servers out and give them to you with no interruption of service. You don't have to change the IP addresses or anything of that nature. It's completely seamless to the customer. You may be thinking, okay, well, why can't I just do this myself? Well, While EC2 and AWS are fairly easy compared to what came before, it still requires a lot of skills to do correctly. We at Phonesuite have spent the last 2 years gaining the required skills and knowledge to work with AWS and EC2 effectively. So we have spent a lot of time doing research, setting things up, testing, and finding problems and fixing them. Phonesuite does not offer any training or support for AWS or EC2. So if you want to go it alone, you are truly going it alone. Phonesuite is not going to offer you manuals, documentation, or training on how to set up or maintain your Amazon Web Services account or anything about EC2, either currently or as they develop new features. So what's the difference between hosted and on-prem? So in a real world, if you were going to do a hosted solution, what are the actual differences that you would need to be aware of when you did the install? Number one, all SIP phones register to a public IP instead of the local one. That is a very minor difference, very easy to do. The SIP phones don't care which server they register to, whether it's local or in the cloud. Analog phones must use a gateway, and we're going to talk about this more later, but an analog phone can't talk directly to the cloud. It needs to be converted from an analog signal to a SIP signal, and there are many ways to do this. Your PMS connection is also something you need to take into account. With the server in the cloud, obviously you're not going to be able to run a serial cable from the cloud down to your hotel and plug the serial cable into the PMS that happens to be on site. So if you have to use serial cables, you'll need to use either an iPocket, which is a serial to TCP converter, or we have another solution that I'll talk about here in just a moment. Your router must also be configured to allow SIP traffic. This is fairly obvious and fairly easy to figure out if you've done wrong on day of install, as none of your phones, analog or SIP, will work because your router is blocking that traffic. But this is another consideration that has to be made, is you need to allow communication between your local system and the cloud. So, Series 2 as a gateway. One option that you do have is we can, if you want to do cloud, we can give you a Series 2 that'll operate in a gateway-only mode for installation on site. This is beneficial because it can be used not only as an analog gateway between your analog phones and the cloud, but it can also be used as a serial to TCP gateway for the PMS interface. So it's an all-in-one. It'll do both conversions. Now, in this configuration, the Series 2 is not an on-site failover should internet connection be completely lost. You can change it back into a normal Series 2, but it requires you to reconfigure the entire thing from the ground up. It's not an easy, 2-minute process, and it is not designed to be a failover device. So, if any of this is interesting, how do you get started? Well, first you should talk to your customers about what solution meets their needs and what the brand requirements are. We don't want to force anyone to go hosted that doesn't want to be hosted. If they want to do an on-site solution, great. We're going to continue to support that into the future. That's not a problem. But if they want to do cloud, you now have some additional options to help them with what they need. If hosted is required, contact the sales department to begin the process. Normal hardware, if applicable, costs apply, plus a spin-up fee and a monthly fee. That monthly fee is going to account for not only the server costs that we pay to have the thing running up in Amazon Web Services, but also your licensing costs and your software warranty, so that we will maintain the software on these systems. So if we have a software update, we will be contacting you and saying, hey, we have a new software version available, we need to upgrade your system, and you need to ask your customer when is the next time that we can upgrade their system and do a restart. It is worth notating that in the cloud, if we need to do an upgrade, it is still a 30-second downtime as the server reboots to reload the new software, but other than that, it's fairly painless. Note that the billing begins as soon as the order is fulfilled, not the cutover date. So this is a bit of a difference because the server is online as soon as you ask for it, within about 15 minutes in most cases. You're going to begin the monthly billing fee at that point, not the cutover date. This is required because you need the server online ahead of time so you can go in and program it and get everything set up. But that's just a slight difference from an on-prem system. And that is it. So that is Phonesuite's new cloud offering. And again, if you want to do cloud or if your customers are asking for it, we're now giving you expanded options to help give the customer what they want. If you want to go it alone and do your own cloud solution, again, that's not recommended, but that is something that you can talk to the sales department about.